All right, hello everyone. If you're joining us as a part of this special highlight over here on Work to Game, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe over to the Eorzean Archives if you haven't already. We're going to be talking about kind of new jobs as we build into our road to 7.0, and that is in part due to Yoshi P's recent interviews and talking about the idea of creating something unique within Final Fantasy XIV. And I think there's some friction and some, because everybody has a favorite job. Especially if you start looking at tactics, if you start looking at past Final Fantasy games, everybody has a job that maybe isn't yet in Final Fantasy XIV. But as we've seen with some jobs, those can come with preconceived notions of how that job should feel in play. And that doesn't necessarily always going to translate into Final Fantasy XIV's battle system specifically. So we thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about what new jobs do we want to see in Final Fantasy XIV, whether they're unique, what role they would feel. Are there already hints that are the lore has established? So we thought, what better way to ask with the lore guys over at Eorzean Archives to cover this. I open it up to anybody who wants to jump in first. It can be high level, like I just want a role that's like this, or a specific job from any of the Final Fantasy past jobs, and then I'd like to hear why you'd want to see that work within 14 and how maybe you would have it work within the battle system.
Issa or Ninier, you guys want to go first? Because I'll talk forever.
Ninier, go ahead.
Okay, my pick is I've seen other people parrot it, but personally I've not seen a great amount of support for it, which is Green Mage from the Tactics series, which is essentially a sort of a support and debuff mage, focusing on debuffing enemies, casting buff spells essentially. Obviously, it would need to be changed to fit into the game, but I think that could be workable into the system. Also, I suppose predictably by looking at Ninieri, the character, green is my favorite character, favorite color. So I'm just really a big fan of that, partially because it occurred to me and then I sort of hyperfixated on it. But yeah, that and Beastmaster and Chemist.
So as a follow-up, when you see, because like Beastmaster was kind of teased as a limited job, which Chris and I are both like hoping that we'll see additional limited jobs so we can have a better, clear definition of what a limited job is. Right now, it's just limited equals Blue Mage, as opposed to like limited is this different system that has these types of options. But outside of that, would you see Chemist as a limited, or would you? And I use the term curated for every other job. So like, what's your thoughts there?
I would see Chemist as a curated or a full job personally. I think it would work on a system similar maybe to the Astrologian cards and the Royal Road and all of that stuff. Mixing certain elements of potions would be the flavor, I suppose, to cast different spells in finger brackets.
Yeah. Would that be the role of a healer?
I would think healer, maybe a support-focused sort of DPS spellcaster, but healer would be my pick.
All right. Who's next?
Issa, you got one?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a popular one here, the Corsair. I really want a kind of red mage feel brought to range DPS, so I'll actually play them. But a saber and a flintlock pistol. Come on, let's go to Limsa. Let's be pirates. Everybody loves pirates, right? Have a nice little system there where you're actually running down a gauge instead of bringing a gauge up. So when your flintlock gauge goes down, that's when your melee combo gets empowered.
Nice. We have a Corsair job icon already in the game.
Yeah, the Musketeer symbol.
It's ready.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be in 1.0.
It's for anybody that wants
literally
to
next to the Marauder Guild.
It's in the Marauders Guild. So you can go downstairs and it's right there over the door.
The Corsair would be fun. And actually, Issa, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. Okay. The platform is yours, Elio. Pontificate for us.
I'm rather verbose, so. But yeah, if anyone knows me, they know that the biggest one I've been arguing for a long time is Geomancer. By and large, because much like when it came to Reaper or some of the other jobs, there's a lot of pre-existing lore set up to assume that it should be a job, especially if we go to Hingashi at some point, which we've only ever been to Kugane, so we haven't been to Hingashi proper. The thing about Hingashi is it also makes sense as a staging ground to the New World or Mericidia, which are likely places for a 7.0 and 8.0, etc. So whether Geomancer 7.0 or not is, up in the air. But the other primary thing I tend to think about is what makes sense in terms of the pattern of job release, which means that the next job in theory should be a caster or a range. If we assume one, let's say this should be caster, range DPS, or maybe scouting melee, because we did just get a melee with Reaper. So I'm of the mind most likely that we would get a caster and range DPS as our next two for 7.0. But, they could do whatever they want. However, we know from that Yoshi interview that we know that they're definitely looking towards things that have never existed prior. And you can even look that, while scythes have existed in other Final Fantasy games, Reaper has not really. And while Sage technically did in 4 and some other ones, it's never existed in this way. And the new lists are wholesale new. So we're already halfway there.
Yeah.
Gunbreaker did it too. Gunbreaker was a reinvention. As a concept, people were like,
Yes.
well, this one character has a gunblade, and it's oh, squall. But as a playable class like this, Gunbreaker, they've had to pull that out of basically thin air.
Yeah, you're totally right. It does start to move away from that archetype even from there. Yeah, and so because of that, I looked at that. My brain always goes to the easy, the associations to prior existing Final Fantasy, which is probably no longer what we should always be doing. The funny thing is, I also think about either Corsair or for a job like Waka from Final Fantasy X, that you can introduce a luck mechanic like the slots mechanic from his Limit Break or something like that, where you have to, if you introduce a luck mechanic like the Dancer's Feathers, you need to make sure you're doing something that there's enough luck that balances each other's out, because just RNG is not fun. But the benefit of something with Blitzball, like a Blitzball style job, which I'm not arguing I necessarily want, just it's what my brain thinks about, is that you could totally see a Blitzball style game existing in Mericidia or the New World. And the reason that it hasn't shown up in Eorzea or, most of the three great continents prior is because those places have been so removed from the three great continents. But yeah, other than that, the ones that I think about have already been said by my fellow Archons.
So, Elio,
Yeah, go.
somebody from Twitch chat actually pointed out how we could get your scouting gear melee, but it actually be arranged. Have the Corsair share gear with Ninja.
Right.
And then
There you go.
for those people that aren't really digging the Ninja aesthetic, but really do like that two-handed thing, then maybe we have some more roguish glamours for them to wear.
There you go. Oh, Chris, yeah, Gambler Lady Luck. Yeah, exactly. That was my idea for you could add that to Corsair to give him that sort of that vibe.
Yeah, I agree, because that was in 11, Corsair and the Gambler class were sort of fused anyway.
So to really take what you guys suggested and drive it into kind of the conspiracy of it and give it a little more weight than it should have, because they've told us nothing. The SGP hasn't even shown us a t-shirt at FanFest yet. What I would say is in the past, he's talked about wanting to accommodate multiple player types when they add jobs. So assuming we're still getting plural jobs, he's going to want to reach out to as many. He said that if we ever add multiple jobs, because of the number of players that pick DPS, there should always be a DPS. So it's not going to be healer tank. Healers and tanks largely feel like they're already kind of in a good spot. We got 2 shield, 2 direct. The tanks, if anything, I think Dark Knight and Warrior are starting to blend a little bit. And so I think if anything, they've shown we got a lot of identity within tanks. We don't need more people splitting the identity up unless we're going to add more diversity to the role as a role. So I would assume it's a double DPS expansion in 7.0, assuming we're getting 2 base jobs, and God, please give us a limited job. Based on that, I would say a melee DPS and a ranged, just ranged grouping it, gives us the most diversity of players. So Ninja needs a buddy. I think Corsair would be a great, a close ranged pistol. Then we would have the ability to shoot things as a tank, shoot things as a ranged, shoot things. All we would need is a reason to shoot our friends as a healer, and we would have a complete party of just, shooting people. And then over on the range side of things, I would hope it's a magic, just because I'm hoping that we're heading to Mercidia. And so the Arcanists come from the islands in the South Sea that we're going to pass. If you go due south from Thabnare, Mercidia's down there. And so I would hope that we go back and we find the original Arcanists, and they're like, I know you thought we had 2 job stones. We actually had 3. Please don't actually link the experience. Please break them apart. That's just confusing to new players. But I would hope we get another magical job for me, just because of the lore behind it.
If we get
That's
one
my
job,
hope.
if we get one job, it's going to be a caster, in my opinion, because we haven't had a caster since Red Mage. Like, in my mind, we even had Dancer and Shadowbringers. And I think you're right that we shouldn't think like prescriptively that just because that's the order, it must be that order.
Mhm.
But I do think that you could also see a lot of ways in which 7.0 could, in my mind, if we assume we're going to Mirror City, which I think is the safest bet, not the only bet, but the safest bet, the idea of going on a newfound adventure with the Warrior of Light's job for once being a caster rather than a tank or a melee, I think would be a good time to do it.
I'd
So
love
I
that.
think
We need a dot class, right? Now that summoners are in theory getting closer to summoning, we need a dot class if we're
do.
gonna from an MMO complete the feature list standpoint.
Yeah.
they got to figure out how to do it. And then the thing is, Geomancer does support historic Geomancer in other games, and in 11 does support a version of being a dot class. So there's a way to make that work.
The part of me like kind of doesn't want it to be a Geomancer, because I've been told Geomancer is going to happen every single expansion, and so far, like, I've been
Just keep
like
the joke rolling.
just keep it rolling, just like Work to Game hates
When we
Bard.
get Geomancer, the game ends.
Yeah, guys, like, you do know that is the like Yoshi P says, and it shut it down. We had a Geomancer, the code can't support it. Now, like, I think as we move on, there's a lot of lore as it relates to Geomancer, and that's what I'm kind of watching to see as we build into 7.0, because Yoshi P likes to put out various hints within the game, and we saw that a little bit. And I don't know if anybody called it. So if there was a YouTuber or content creator out there that's like Sage beforehand, but we all felt like it's like definitely we're going to get a healer, and then we're going to get something else. And so Reaper felt like pretty good extension, especially with the t-shirts. But Sage, we're like, oh, and then it's like, oh, that actually makes sense. We've seen that happen in the past, etc. But we've seen a lot of lore as it relates to Geomancers that also, in a way, reflect off of the Astrologian. And so Astrologian in the stars, and then there is some earth and time magic that Astro had, but they've kind of pulled out the time magic from Astro's toolkit. And so within Geomancer, like, it could be something interesting. I'd love to see a dot, like a dot mage. Like I am a dotter, and that's what I do. Man, like, I'm starting to kind of lean that, but the player in me, the Final Fantasy Tactics vet in me wants and loves and would just lose my mind if we got a time mage. Being that we've seen time magic in and of itself get pulled out, they could do that within dots. You could almost, in a way, like, you could put on your dots, and then as a part of a time mage, you could literally sit here and say speed up time, so those dots all just kind of pop off at once. So you have the ability to dot, and you have the ability to spike, all within the concept of time magic in and of itself. And that's something that I still like. Final Fantasy XI just celebrated its 20th anniversary. The director's talking about, like, man, I'd love to make a new expansion. I'd love to redo our dev environment. All these things that he's like, he would love to do. And I would love to make that happen. We just got to get, Ninja Tyler Blevins to fund that with his 1 million pledge. It's like, come on, guys, we're going to crowdfund Square Enix doing this thing for us. But if they announced a time age within 11, I would like, that would be insane too. I've always wanted that aspect, and people made the argument that there's, Red Mage has some of that. Like, what would you do? And so when it comes down to balancing, I guess the question, kind of the final question here, and what I'm kind of feeling ultimately, are we thinking, like, yes, we're not going to count like a limited job, because Chris and I, we think that they definitely I want to see them do the Puppet Master or the Beast Master, or help both, but not counting that as a totaling job here.
Give me a Pokemon.
Are we feeling just one job it might be the reality as we go into the next expansion? I think at some point you have to.
Oh, please.
I think it's possible. I don't know if it's 7.0, but I definitely think that inevitably happens.
I think so.
Yeah.
In fact, I think
I'm
maybe
going
we
with
get
a
one
definite
job.
yes.
You have to.
I think-
The roles helped kind of stall it, right? Saying, thank God we don't have to keep doing an increasing number of job quests. The role quests and the shared gear helps, but like at some point, you gotta stop.
I agree.
You can't keep just saying, like, now we're balancing 23 jobs, 37 jobs, 82 jobs. It's like you gotta slow down, man.
My one argument for why I don't necessarily know if 7.0 will be it is because there's a big benefit to them having 4 and 4 for casters and range DPS if they want to do something like what they've done with healers.
Yeah.
Where, for instance, we already have, you have your red mage and your summoner with their reses, and then you have black mage like true DPS. Imagine your 4th DPS is also a true DPS. It gives you options for balancing and splitting into the future. And that's why 7.0 is the one where I'm like, it could go either way. I lean more on we'll still get 2, but I definitely think you get into 8.0. There's just that has to happen.
Yeah, I can see if they do 2, we get the like a ranged caster and a ranged physical, because you're right. Because then, I mean, while obviously this is just we have 5 within the melee, category, but we do have the 4 tanks, the 4 healers. We technically, I guess you could say, you have 4 casters with blue mage, but still, like, again, I'm kind of putting that in its own system.
Yeah.
So there's a symmetry that my brain just kind of picks up on, and obviously they're not working on. Like, we got to make these roles, symmetrical, because they could still, with the physical range, like chat pointed out, tie a Corsair into that aspect within the rogue, the ninja. And I think that would be really cool to see, personally speaking, especially when you start to like say, hey, what are you kind of gearing up? And it's like, oh, I got a Corsair, and I would love that for the Corsair. The only reason why I think I'm biased towards Time Mage, hands down. Let's just admit it. But then there's going to be a part of me that would be literally tickled if it's not if it's not Geomancer, and we just keep kicking that can down the road, because people have been like, they were saying like, Shadowbringers, man, Geomancer, it's absolutely Geomancer. I'm like, no way. And then Endwalker, it's absolutely Geomancer. I was like, I feel like I'm so sorry, but you're wrong. Like, there's just no way it's going to be Geomancer. Now I think it could probably have a deeper connection with it, a greater chance, but a part of me just wants to continue that meme.
So the reason everybody was going Geomancer going into Shadowbringers is because we had Swallow's Compass, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so they were like,
that's why.
They were like, okay, so they planted the lore for this job. Obviously, we're gonna get it. And then Endwalker comes up, and they're like, I remember that they planted the lore for this job, but now in this one, they have further planted the lore for that job.
Yeah. In my mind, Geomancer only makes sense if you do Hingashi stuff. Like, if you don't do that, adding it justifying it becomes weird. And I will say, like, the one I did call Reaper was one of the few times that I actually called something correctly. Part of the reason I don't want Geomancer to be right is because I want my viewers to dunk on me, which I know they inevitably will when I'm wrong. But with Ranjit, I was like, okay, that is what the new job is. Not that literally, but some interpretation of this character. This idea of Scythe mixed with Persona, whether with like familiar beast, and then what we get with Reaper and the lore there.
Oh, I like that lore. I really have enjoyed playing Reaper.
I like to watch the world burn a little bit. So I want King Moogle Ultimate as the 6.3. It's probably Omega, but I want to see like Blue Mage Phase 7 shenanigans. Blue Mage Moogle just wrecking people. But what I'm hopeful for with the new job is whatever it is, based on his last interview, that the naming, even if it is a Time Mage like Brian's asking for, name it something so that we just get to watch everybody speculate. I hope he names it something loose enough that we don't know what we're getting. So it's just like, oh, it's Purple Mage. That's all I'm telling you.
All right.
Have fun, internet. Like, all the guy has
Go.
The synergist.
He's the synergist. Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh.
Purple Mage is a dot mage. Just saying.
Yeah. And then on that kind of note, then it's like you can kind of look at the history there. Like, it'd be kind of neat to kind of pull out like out of the hat of some of these like random jobs, like from Final Fantasy VI, the painter. It's like, oh, interesting. Like, and then it's like, and then there's this, like with Bard having its own lore type system. It'd be interesting to see if they were like, oh, let's go ahead and start having these jobs actually have some kind of other kind of non-combat style, kind of system that people can kind of play around with. Be interesting. All right, you guys ready to move into our next topic?
I've got one small tangent.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
So we've been talking about jobs. What do you guys think is going to be the poster job for the next expansion? Cover art job.
I don't know what job, but caster. I think so.
We haven't had a caster on in a while. Like Black Mage comes to mind for 2.0.
Wow.
That was very thematic. I think essentially, yeah. I think I would like to see a caster. We've seen tank. Healer. Man, I don't see them doing a healer as a part of that. Like, I don't know. Like I think healing has a very like niche kind of role based off of when I look at like Duty Finder stuff, but I think caster could be something kind of interesting because you could kind of, you know, market big booms or something. Would like the question though is like, if it is caster, if it ends up being a black mage again, do you think you're going to see lots of people calling out Yoshi P like bias from his love of black mage? The reason it was a black mage is because Yoshi P.
The thing about healer too
think,
is you have Urianger and Alfino already like to represent that somewhat in the like party balance. Like so I would wonder.
I think that we get a summoner as the poster job in 7.0. I'm pretty confident because Mericidia, Bahamut, Eggies, there's all sorts of primals down there. It just seems to make sense to me.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I think I would like to see it. Like that hands down. I'd like to see it.